right now, Joe Biden's leading in the race in the Democratic primaries. Number 2 is Bernie Sanders. Now, Biden drafted the '94 crime bill. And so it turns out Bernie Sanders voted for that bill. And there are good things in that bill. And one of the things that Biden should get credit for is there's the Violence Against Women Act in that bill. And Bernie Sanders explained at the time that was the main reason that he was voting for that bill and that he did not like the other provisions in the bill. In fact, you're gonna see a video of Bernie Sanders explaining what he didn't like in the bill in a little bit. But Biden has been fairly unrepentant about it. We'll show you that as well. But to give you a sense of how hardcore was at the time Biden was, and it's important for you guys to know, so because he says that he still stands by it today. Now, and before I even give you the first clip, just understand there's 2 crime bills that were proposed. The one was in '91 that did not pass. Biden said he co-authored that and worked on it and was proud to work on it with Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond was a deeply racist senator from South Carolina who ran on the segregationist ticket earlier in his career and said that white and blacks should not mix. So, and now you're gonna see Biden bragging about some portions of the '91 bill as well. The '94 version is the one that eventually passed. So first, let's go to Biden here.
The president's death penalty proposals, and I might add, Biden crime bill is before us, calls for the death penalty for 51 offenses. A wag in the newspaper recently wrote that something to the effect that Biden has made it a death penalty offense for everything but jaywalking. The president's bill calls for the death penalty on 46 offenses. The difference is negligible. Yet let's put it in, I am a supporter of the death penalty. I am a supporter of the death penalty without the racial justice provision in it. I think it's better with it, but I'm supportive without it in it as well.
Well, you must be so proud. So he's like, even if you don't have racial justice, I support the death penalty. He bragged in that clip, you just saw with your own eyes, that he was giving the death penalty to everyone but jaywalkers.
He bragged about that.
Yeah, so this is the guy who's supposed to be a progressive that we're all supposed to be proud of. Okay, now let's keep going. He couldn't stop talking about how much he loved the draconian measures in these crime bills.
We must take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street.
That is the guy who's supposed to represent all Democrats in the year 2018. So again, he stands by all of this. You're gonna see that for yourself with your own eyes in a minute. Now, you might think, well, I guess everybody who voted for that bill, because now that's 93 that he's giving that speech, and they're gonna pass the legislation in 94. Well, everyone must have agreed at the time, right? Nope. So here is Bernie Sanders talking about that same piece of legislation.
Mr. Chairman, how do we talk about the very serious crime problem in America without mentioning that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world by far, with 22% of our children in poverty and 5 million kids hungry today? Do you think maybe that might have some relationship to crime? How do we talk about crime when this Congress is prepared this year to spend 11 times more for the military than for education? When 21% of our kids drop out of high school, when a recent study told us that twice as many young workers now earn poverty wages as 10 years ago, when the gap between the rich and the poor is growing wider, and when the rate of poverty continues to grow. Do you think maybe that might have some relationship to crime?
So Anna, look at the contrast there. Biden says, I don't care if they are poor, I don't care what caused the crime, I just want to put them away and maybe give them the death penalty. Bernie Sanders says, yeah, I care. Of course I care what caused the crime. That's the smart way to handle it. And I care that people are in poverty.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a very significant difference there in the perception of crime in America, the causes of crime in America, the treatment toward people who commit crimes in America. But more importantly, I want to talk about the type of discourse happening right now in the mainstream media in regard to what Biden did and what Bernie Sanders did. Because while Bernie Sanders did vote for the crime bill, as Cenk mentioned earlier, he went out there on the House floor and he said, I do not agree with this bill, but they included the Violence Against Women Act in that bill. And at that time, considering the prevalence of domestic violence that women were facing, he felt that it was important to make sure that those resources and that portion of the crime bill was something he votes in favor of. So that's the reason why he voted for it. And again, he went on the House floor and just completely said the most negative things imaginable about the crime bill itself, but said that he wanted to vote for it for the Violence Against Women Act. The way the mainstream media is covering it, though, is they are blaming him for voting in favor of the crime bill. They're not showing his reasoning for why he voted for it, while at the same time, they give Biden, the person who co-authored that legislation, a complete pass. It's amazing to me. Like, they will do anything to slander Bernie Sanders when he's the one who was critical of that bill, whereas Biden, till this day, is very defiant and very proud of the fact that he voted, co-authored it.
Okay, so look, you should also give Biden credit, as I said earlier, for including the Violence Against Women Act or for pushing it, okay? On the other hand, you didn't have to do it in this bill. Part of the reason that it was put in this bill was to get progressive votes.
That's right.
They're like, well, you don't want to vote against women, right? So we're gonna put it into this otherwise draconian bill that has 3 strikes, that increases penalties, that increases funding for prisons, and Biden's talking about we're gonna kill everybody out there and I don't care why. But I put the Violence Against Women Act in there, so now guys like Bernie Sanders gotta vote for it and I'll hold it over their heads for the rest of their lives. So now, again, continue with the language, go back to Biden, and his language gets even worse.
I don't care why someone is a malfactor in society. I don't care why someone is antisocial. I don't care why they become a sociopath. We have an obligation to cordon them off from the rest of society, try to help them, try to change their behavior. That's why we do in this bill. We have drug treatment and we have other treatments to try to deal with it. But they are in jail, away from my mother.
Such a coded language for, hey, look, as long as they're not bothering us, right? I don't care, give a damn about them.
And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society.
Man, they are beyond the pale, those predators. And so, of course, Hillary Clinton got in trouble for saying super predators, and here's Joe Biden with very similar language. Now, again, at the time, was everyone talking like that? No. In fact, Bernie Sanders in the '94 version said he was worried specifically that it was gonna hurt Black Americans worse than it was gonna hurt other people, and he was worried about that. And then I wanna show you one last Bernie clip from '91 when he was railing against another Biden crime bill.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to the McCulloch Amendment and, in fact, in strong opposition to this so-called crime prevention bill. Mr. Speaker, let us be honest, this is not a crime prevention bill. This is a punishment bill, a retribution bill, a vengeance bill. All over the industrialized world now, countries are saying, let us put an end to state murder, let us stop capital punishment. But here what we're talking about is more and more capital punishment. What we're discussing now is an issue where some of our friends are saying we're not getting tough enough on the criminals. But my friends, we have the highest percentage of people in America in jail per capita of any industrialized nation on earth. We've beaten South Africa. We've beaten the Soviet Union. What do we have to do? Put half the country behind bars? Mr. Speaker, instead of talking about punishment and vengeance, let us have the courage to talk about the real issue. How do we get to the root causes of crime? How do we stop crime, which is in fact a very, very serious problem in this country? And Mr. Speaker, I've got a problem. I've got a problem with a president and a Congress which allows 5 million children to go hungry, 2 million people to sleep out on the streets, cities to become breeding grounds for drugs and violence. And they say, we're getting tough on crime. If you want to get tough on crime, let's deal with the causes of crime.
So Bernie Sanders consistent in every issue through all of these years. But to be fair to Biden, so was he. So even though the 94 crime bill led to mass incarceration, and even Bill Clinton said, and of course he was the president in 94 when it passed, and he's the one who pushed it. He said, I signed a bill that made the problem worse, and I want to admit it. Now, does Biden admit it? No, he's consistent, still proud of it. Let's show you.
Another thing about how perspectives change over time. Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, I'm ashamed that I voted for the 94 crime bill. You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. And in fact, I drafted the bill. Of the money in the crime bill, the vast majority went to reducing sentences, diverting people from going to jail for drug offenses into what I came up with, the drug courts, providing for boot camps instead of sending people to prison so you didn't relearn whatever the bad thing that got you there in the first place. Put 100,000 cops in the street. When community policing was working, neighborhoods were not only safer, but they were more harmonious.
So the fact that he said he was proud of it is super clear. That's not from 25 years ago, that's from today.
And he lied. I mean, lied. And we know that, we know he lied. If you've been paying attention to this show at all, you know that that was full of lies. And I hadn't seen that video. This is the first time I saw that video. And I'm literally trying to compose myself because of the rage I'm feeling because of those lies. So let me just give you some details, some facts, figures, statistics. The bill earmarked $8.7 billion over 6 years for states to build more prisons. About half of that was available to states that enacted truth in sentencing laws, which curb paroles and required people convicted of violent crimes to serve at least 85% of their sentences.
So that's important because one of Biden's excuses overall for this is, well, this is just a federal bill. It didn't affect states, and 90% of the people that are in prison are at the state level. But that's actually not true either. It actually encouraged states to build more prisons and would give them more money if they locked up people for longer periods of time, which they did.
I mean, he's trying to rebrand this as if it was an effort to rehabilitate people and keep them out of prison. Hell no, that is not what happened. It is just simply not what happened. If you look at the facts, objectively looked at the facts and statistics, the opposite happened. A Pew 2012 study of 36 states found that the average length of stay for offenders released from prison in 2009 increased 36% from 1990, with 9 states reporting increases of over 50%.
So did it lead to further incarceration? Absolutely, 36% more. There's no question about it, and that's a fact. In fact, Bill Clinton, when asked about it, said in that bill there were longer sentences, and most of these people are in prison under state law, but the federal law set a trend, and that was overdone. We were wrong about that. That percentage of it, we were wrong about it. So that's Bill Clinton, the president who proudly signed it and bragged about it, saying we were wrong about it. And Biden saying, no, we weren't. So what, there's more people incarcerated? In fact, I'm gonna pretend that there was less people incarcerated.
No, I'm not done. The incarceration rate per 100,000 US residents was about 100 for 100,000 residents until the 1970s. By 1994, the rate had increased to 387 per 100,000. After passage of the crime bill, it kept going up. 478 in 2000, 500 in 2010, 655 in 2016. The United States now has 5% of the world's population and 1/4 of the world's prisoners.
So let's do some math there. In 94, when they passed the bill, it's 387 now, or 3 years ago in 2016, it's 655 people for every 100,000. So that is nearly double the amount of people that are in prison as a percentage of our population.
I'm not
so
done.
Did they go up? Absolutely. And by the way, did it work? No. So guys like Biden will now go around and go, hey, the crime rate went down, right? No, if you look at the numbers, the crime rate started to go down in 91, 3 years before they passed the bill. So that isn't true either.
All right, there's more. The crime bill's Federal Death Penalty Act permitted the use of the death penalty for 60 new federal offenses, including certain drug offenses not related to a homicide. In the 5 years following the bill's passage, 74% of defendants with death penalty recommendations from federal prosecutors were people of color. Notably, 44% were Black and 21% were Hispanic. And by the way, the source, if you can notice, was the Center for American Progress, which is, of course, very friendly to establishment types like Biden. And so we're using that source to give you a sense of how utterly disastrous that crime bill was. The crime bill's 3 strikes provision sent thousands of Americans to prison for life based on previous offenses for minor crimes, such as stealing loose change from a parked car. In 2016, 78.5% of Americans serving life sentences in federal prison were people of color.
Wow, 78.5% of people serving life sentences are people of color. And you saw earlier when Biden, when debating the 91 bill, said, racial justice, that'd be good if it was in the bill, but I don't really care. I still want the death penalty.
He sits there and he lies.
And so finally, people are in the mainstream media are giving Biden credit because they say, Obama picked Biden, so he must be great for the African American community. But remember, Obama didn't need help with the African American community. He didn't pick Biden because he had a great track record with African Americans. He picked Biden to make white voters comfortable. So that's the history of Biden and Obama. So, and now you know, and you saw it with your own eyes, the reality of who's right and who's wrong in the crime bill and what it led to. On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcasts.